Alright, this one is going to be on holiness. Welcome back, everybody. Alright, so what is holiness? According to Wayne Grudem, holiness, God's holiness means that he is separated from sin and devoted to seeking his own honor. So God is very much into his holiness, right? We see examples of that throughout the Bible, especially Old Testament with people like Moses, right? Moses is God seeking to devote his own honor, and he wants it to be separate from sin, right? So we're sinful. So when he comes to earth, or came to earth in different examples, he was still separate, right? With Moses in the burning bush. Moses had to keep his distance, and Moses was not fully engulfed in God's holiness, right? There was a separation that occurred there. And the same with in later times when they were carrying the Ark of Covenant in not the right way. It was on a cart and they were wheeling it, and it went to fall, and someone went to save it and keep it from falling, and he was instantly smited, right? That is another example of God's holiness. He's set apart, and that was his tabernacle. That was the Ark of the Covenant. That's where he was, his presence was. So when someone touched that, the separation kind of, again, was broken. So he instantly killed him because he needs to be separate, right? So we're going to be looking at Leviticus chapter 19. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to all the congregation of Israel, and say to them, You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Every one of you shall revere his mother and father. You shall keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. Do not turn to idols, or make for yourselves any gods of cast metal. I am the Lord your God. When you offer sacrifice of peace offerings to the Lord, you shall offer it so that you may be accepted. It shall be eaten the same day as you offer it, or on the day after, and anything left over until the third day shall be burned up with fire. If it is eaten at all on the third day, it is tainted, and it will not be accepted. And everyone who eats it shall bear his iniquity, because he has profaned what is holy to the Lord, and that person shall be cut off from his people. Alright, so we're going to look at this. Leviticus is not something most people would go to, but this is very fascinating. So the Lord starts by, he's talking to Moses here. He says, Speak to the congregation of the people of Israel, and say to them, You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. So that is our, right, that's his expectation of us, is holiness. But, as we talked about last time with grace, he knows we will never fully be holy, right? That's why he sent Jesus, is so he can take our not holiness, and he sees Jesus' holiness instead of our awful, gross sin. So it says, should be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. So he's saying you should be holy, you should be set apart from sin, and devoted to seeking God's honor. That's what we should be doing, right? We should be separate from sin, and we should be devoted to seeking God's honor. So we should be worshiping God. We should be coming to God with stuff, right? That's what it means for us to be holy, right? For God to be holy, it means he has his best interest, but he deserves his best interest, if you know what I mean, right? So, every one of you shall revere your mother and father, and you shall keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. Do not turn to idols or make for yourselves any gods of cast metal, for I am the Lord your God. Right? That's all simple commandments, right? Well, not simple. They're hard to follow, but right? Revere your mother and father. You hear these all the time. So those are ways we can act out in holiness. Those are sins that we can fight against, right? So what's the opposite of doing those things? It's not doing them. When you offer sacrifice of peace offerings to the Lord, you shall offer it so that you may be accepted. It shall be eaten on the same day you offer it, or on the day after, and anything left over on the third day shall be burned up with fire. If it is eaten at all on the third day, it is tainted and will not be accepted. Anyone who eats it shall bear his iniquity, because he has profaned what is holy to the Lord, and that person shall be cut off from his people. So we see with the sacrificial system that God set up that he wants us to do it in a certain way. And that certain way, and us doing it in that certain way, means us being separate. God wants it done his way because he's holy. He needs it done a certain way for him to be able to accept it. So he sets out some rules. Those rules, as we see, some of those are rules. Those ones may not mean much to us now, but back then these were super important. It's why they had the high priests who slayed the bulls, right? And all of them did it because they wanted it to be done right. These rules are set in place so that God's holiness can stay, right? God's holiness is incredibly important and something that he, again, is devoted to protecting. That separate, so if you ate the meat of a sacrifice and it was after the second day, you would burn it, right? And something else that's interesting is that God says a person shall be cut off from his people if he has profaned it, because anyone who eats it will bear his iniquity, because he has profaned what is holy to the Lord. So God, and what stuff that he sets as holy, as we see here, right? The stuff that God says is holy, he protects that. So if we are Christians and we are holy, right? Well, not perfect like his holiness, but we are more. So God's willing to protect us. And that the person who does it, it says over here, is cut off from his people. So if someone would do something, if someone got leprosy, if someone got caught doing something, if someone did a wrong sacrifice, they would be kicked out, because they should be cut off from the people. They should be separated, because the ones over here in Israel, they're holy to God, right? Those are the people. And then the people doing something wrong get kicked out. So that's important to know, right? God is willing to protect us if we're holy, right? And we should be trying to withhold that holiness, because it's a very important measure, and God took it very seriously, as we see. Jesus' death and resurrection is so important, because the barrier, that barrier is now, we're supposed to be on the other side of that barrier. We're supposed to be the guy who's cut off from his people. Instead, we are on side with God. And when Jesus died on the cross, the most holy place, that curtain was ripped, because God said, now you don't have to be a high priest to go in there. Anyone can come to me. And that was one of the things that was so important about Jesus' death, right? Because before that place you couldn't go. You couldn't talk to God on your own. You had to have a priest. You had to do everything through a priest. Now, by Jesus' death, he tore that curtain, and now anyone can go to God. And God, again, he's willing to protect his holiness. We see that with even high priests, or people who weren't high priests going into the most holy place would instantly be killed. There's people that used to tie a bell with a rope to people the high priest, when they would go in there, because if they weren't consecrated to God, they would be killed, right? So that God's holiness is not something to mess with. But the good thing is God is also our judge, jury, and our lawyer, right? God is himself is judge, he is the jury, and he is our lawyer. So no matter what, we have him fighting for us, and his decisions are to better us, and he's willing to defend our honor. And it's just amazing to me that he's that good of a God, right? Anyway, so we should be set apart from this world, and that's something that we should live trying to be, right? We should be a light. We should be different. It might not look the same to everyone, but we should try our best to be set apart. And as hard as that is, God will help us. So hope you enjoyed this one, and make sure you stay tuned for more. Have a good one.